Okay, Aka's here. We can start. So we're gonna make a start. Let me put my video on. Hi everybody. Thank you for joining this kind of little small press, kind of like a virtual press conference. I think this is kind of the new way, considering everyone's, at home with COVID. So before we start, I just want to begin by acknowledging that we are all meeting on Aboriginal land, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I also want to acknowledge that Australia, the land, is sovereign and has never been ceded. If people feel like they want to make any acknowledgement to country from wherever you're from, feel free to type it into the chat section. So I want to just introduce everybody here today. So first of all, thank you for attending the Asian Australian Alliance.
Now this is more about a nice to have slide for you guys that you guys can.
Okay, cool. So if, first of all, just a very quick housekeeping, if people who are not talking, if you could just put yourself on mute, that would be appreciated, just so that we can kind of hear everybody as they're talking. So just by way of introduction, the Asian Australian Alliance, in collaboration with Osmond Chiu, who's a research fellow at Per Capita Think Tank, we launched the COVID-19 Racism Incident Report Survey back on April 2nd, 2020. We have released one preliminary report which span from April 2nd, 2020 to June 2nd, 2020. And this is basically our second report, which we are tracking from the day we've launched in April 2020 up to June 28th of this year. So for those who are joining us today, you should have received an advanced copy of the report. So you can see there's we've tracked about 541 incidents that have been reported. In terms of who will be speaking today, I'd like to introduce just a few people. So my name's Erin, and I'm one of the founders and national convener for the Asian Australian Alliance. We also have one of our co-founders and head Victorian convener, Molina Asthana. We have our third co-founder of the Asian Australian Alliance, Benjamin O, as well, and who is also the national convener for the Asian Australian Rainbow Alliance. We have our New South Wales convener, Thompson Ching, who is going to be doing the technical stuff, and a few other conveners across the country are joining. Adri Lozano from New South Wales. We have Amy Kim from Brisbane, Yao Tong Chia from New South Wales as well. So I just want to acknowledge them. We also have GoFundMe, Nicola Britton from GoFundMe Australia, who we collaborated with the Stop Asian Hate Australia campaign. And so she'll talk a little bit more when we get up to that point. And we also have one of our awesome and celebrity ambassadors for the campaign. So we have 4 ambassadors. Today we have here Aka Das, who a lot of you guys would recognize. He was in Lion, and he was also in Mulan, and many other things that I've seen him in over the years. Our other ambassador she's going to try to make it because she's in Toronto.
She's here, Erin.
Pallavi, okay, cool. So Pallavi Sharda is here. So Pallavi is in Tom and Jerry. She was also in Lion, and she's had a very long career in Bollywood as well, very successful career in Bollywood. So it's great to have those two present today, and they'll be talking as well. Our other 2 ambassadors who are unable to make it, but who have done media representations in the past, were Remy He and Chris Pang as well. So just very quickly, just want to acknowledge, Jenny Leong, the state member for Newtown, who is present here today as well. So just very quickly, before we move on to the next person who will be speaking, just by way of introduction. So I guess this report kind of stems from a lot of the, I guess we want to use the word combative, or a lot of the confrontational approach between the Western bloc of countries, and towards China. And where that is, I guess, more geopolitical, a lot of the racial backlash does impact on the on Asians in Australia. And it doesn't not just impact on the Chinese or people of Chinese background. It has impacted on people of all different Asian backgrounds. And if you read the report, we do a lot of, we do talk about the shifting of blame. And we saw that particularly with Melbourne and the second wave, which happened, I believe, June or July 2020, there was a big blaming of migrants, particularly in Melbourne and, places like that, Flemington, the Flemington Towers, but also, that pinpointing that it is highly populated migrant areas where the community transmission of COVID was high. And the other shift that we have also seen kind of just in the news cycle is that shift of blame on those of South Asian background, particularly with the travel ban on Indians and a lot of Australians who were stranded in India for quite a while, could not return, and they were just left there, despite a majority of all of them being citizens and or permanent residents of Australia. And we all know here today that the majority of those Australians who were stranded in India are of Indian/South Asian background. So that's kind of what we mean by kind of shifting the blame. In saying that, I think that there's a lot that we can learn from that. And I think I might move on to Molina to kind of very briefly kind of go through the results, just pinpoint some key ones.
Thanks, Erin, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Erin's already provided the background. I will just briefly mention some of the report findings. So in terms of the types of incidents that we were reported, we just as a note, respondents were able to select more than one category. So the percentages reflect this variable. So the highest number were the direct racial slurs / name calling. For example, go back to China, stop eating bats / dogs, ching chong, etc., which was at 35.7%. The next was online harassment at 25.7%. The third was making it out as a joke at 13.1%. For example, making a racist targeted comment / statement and then laughing it off and or dismissing it as not being racist, but just joking around. Next was verbal threats at 8.9%. Are you making a targeted racist comment / statement with verbal intent to cause harm? Then that was followed by getting spat / sneezed or coughed upon at 7.78%. This was followed by physical intimidation and harassment at 7.03%. The next was shunning, which was 6.5%, which is deliberate avoidance or exclusion of Asians or Asian Australians. The last was workplace discrimination at 2.2%. In terms of location of incidents, respondents were able to select more than one category again, then percentages reflect this variable. The maximum number of incidents happened on public street or sidewalks at 27.1%. Next was at businesses, supermarket or grocery stores or general stores at 15.1%. Public transport, 9.6%. Shopping centers at 8.7%. Public park or community areas at 6.2%. Restaurants, bars, public food areas at 5.4%. In terms of changes in percentages, the key changes have been in the types of incidents. There has been an increase in racial slurs and name calling and physical harassment. In terms of location of incident, there has been a significant decrease in incidents in public streets and supermarkets. There has been an increase in incidents at public parks or spaces on public transport and workplaces. There has also been a significant increase in online harassment, and there has been an increase in percentage of international student respondents. There are also changes in terms of who gets the blame and who's targeted, which is detailed in the report, and Erin has already alluded to that. In terms of other trends, in terms of gender, those who identified as female, 60.1% were the largest number of respondents, followed by those who identified as male at 34.1%. Respondents who identified as self-described, i.e. those who do not identify as being female or male, constituted 3.8% of respondents. Respondents who identified as having a Chinese or cultural background were at 52%. They reported more incidents than other races or ethnic groups, followed by Vietnamese at 8.38%, Malaysian at 4.5%, Korean at 6.5%, Singaporean 2.1%, and Filipino 3.2%. Note that the respondents were able to select multiple cultural backgrounds and identities, so our report reflects that. For respondents who identified as international students, which was 12.3%, out of those, 95.2% were of mainland Chinese background. 85.9% of the respondents reported that they did not know the perpetrator, indicating that the majority of incidents were perpetrated by strangers. In terms of reporting to the authorities, reporting to the police or any type of regulatory body, 84.8% reported that they did not report this incident, which is really disturbing. So that's just a summary of the report. We'll go into more detail a bit later. Thank you.
Thank you, Molina. I might, Ben, if you don't mind, I might just change the order a little bit around, because I know Aka has to leave as soon as he speaks. So I might kind of just move it up a little bit. So just want to introduce everyone to Aka Das. And I don't think he needs much introduction, because a lot of us, you know, if people don't recognize his name, you would recognize his face on quite a number of films in Australia, but also international. So Aka, I'll let you kind of talk for a little bit before you have to leave. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Firstly, I really appreciate being here. Thanks for the lovely introduction, Erin. And so great to see all the lovely work you guys are doing. And I know how hard it is to get people together from across the world, especially at this time. You know, case being I'm here in Thailand at the moment, in Bangkok. So pretty fitting for me to be sort of speaking about this as well from Asia at the moment. And I, you know, just was thinking as you guys were talking about the experiences that people have felt through this pandemic and the racism that exists around it. You know, it actually reminds me so much of the time when of the 9/11 terrorist attack, you know, when sort of Middle Eastern people were feeling the same thing, and a lot of Indian people and South Asian people, because they, you know, looked similar, were facing those kind of that kind of hatred and vitriol and stuff like that. When it is clearly such a geopolitical issue, and this pandemic is not really even a geopolitical issue. I mean, it's a 1 in 100-year pandemic, so it's really crazy to see how that sort of racism kind of trickles down from it. So yeah, it's, you know, gravely disappointing. I know it's worse in America and North America and probably parts of the parts of Europe and the United Kingdom, but in Australia, it's always sort of underneath the surface, I think. And so I think that's the big thing about this campaign, is to bring that out to the forefront. I mean, just before I left, actually, as sort of Sydney was going into a lockdown, and people in Sydney will know how sort of, you know, political it got, because they started to lock down a lot of the certain areas of Southwest Sydney and West Sydney. And I'm originally from Western Sydney, so I grew up there, and I do a lot of work around Western Sydney. So it was really interesting to see the change in rhetoric and the tone from the politicians as soon as the virus started to sort of spread west, where all the ethnic and immigrant communities are, especially the Asian and South Asian communities and Middle Eastern communities. And I just thought, you know, that's reminiscent of the Melbourne lockdown, when that happened with the towers, the Flemington Towers and the tower blocks. So I just think that it's really, really, you know, for lack of a better word, funny when sort of the virus starts to shift and the blame shifting starts to happen, as Erin was mentioning before, is that as soon as the, you know, spike happened in India, it was locked down the Indian citizens from coming back home. But when obviously the spikes were going on in the US and the UK at the beginning, there wasn't that sort of same amount of that similar rhetoric. So I made a tweet about it, about Southwest Sydney being spoken to, you know, people over there are you know, intentionally spreading the virus, or you know, intentionally moving around and coughing on each other, and you know, being you know, and being subjected to this this crazy rhetoric, when, for example, if it's in the sort of more affluent areas of Eastern Sydney, they're spoken to in such a nice manner and told to enjoy the sunshine and kind of go home and be safe. So I think that's telling on a domestic level how of the bigger picture of what we're talking about. So I think I just wanted to reflect on that a little bit and just say that it's disappointing, and I think the change really would come from having more people of South Asian backgrounds in our politics. I think that's the most important thing, and in Australian politics, in an Australian government, in Australia, all levels of government. And I know there are, of course, people in there, and it's the same way that representation works in the media. It's like need the representation, in politics and governance, because I think that they know how to. We know how to talk to our people, and we know how to communicate with them, and they don't all have the same values. They have different family sets and different family nucleuses. So I think it's about making that change, I think. And I hope this campaign starts to sort of drive towards making the bigger changes, which is having more people of Asian, South Asian, Middle Eastern background who represent a large portion of Australia in the Australian demographic, to represent us in the governance and in the media. And I think that's probably the way for true change. And I think that I really am proud to be a part of this campaign that can help drive towards that. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm really excited and proud about all the work that you guys are doing.
Great. Thank you, Aka, and thank you for that personal touch. And hopefully quarantine is going to be treating you well in Bangkok. And yeah, thank you very much.
I'm getting looked after. Thank you so much. I can't complain. But thanks all, and stay safe and take care. I know it's a tough time in so many cities. So take care.
Thank you, Aka. So we'll quickly move to Benjamin O, one of our co-founders of the Asian Australian Alliance, as well as the national convener and the founder for the Asian Australian Rainbow Alliance. And Ben will just kind of go through just a few of we call it the de-identified experiences. So those that kind of responded into our survey, but obviously we took out the names and things like, names and where, just put the experiences on. So Ben, I'll just move it over to you.
Thanks, Erin. Just some of the categories that we have put under, we've put them under like verbal threats. We list them under as perceived jokes. We list them under as intimidation, physical intimidation, and some of the environmental contexts. Some of them are workplace discrimination, and of course, many of them are also online on the digital setting. What is disturbing, I think, in a lot of the de-identified experiences, it's how many of them repeated. Not exactly the same, but it is very similar in the content. And obviously, some of them were from the former. Led by the former US president, who used some of the terms, and those terms were repeated exactly verbatim. And some of the terms that are used by politicians here were being used. So obviously, leadership is very, very important on how to name and address and call things out. And I'll just read some of them. So if it's too disturbing for you, we ask you to please do seek support. Lifeline, it's one of them. Beyond Blue, if they are triggering for you, just for this short moment, maybe just while I'm speaking, when you see that I'm actively speaking, maybe if it's too triggering for you, maybe turn on mute for just while doing my section, my section. And of course, some of this you'll find them on the report itself. So there was just on the verbal one, there was one of the incidences that were quite disturbing, and we found that repeated again in some supermarket. so this is one of the common circumstance, was someone that was sending a package of gift to their cousin who was about to have a baby. An older white identified couple was filling a form at another post counter, and they look at the person and called them a disgusting virus, and then say, quote, haven't your lot sent enough stuff to China? One of the incidences was at a supermarket where a young couple, they were just separate on different aisles. One of the couple was with a baby. The other one was was shopping for milk powder. Similarly, they were given a dirty stare and say that, you know, why you're hoarding all the milk powder, you know? So there are similar threats along those lines, but again, this goes, what I want to highlight in this example, it's the two link, it's before COVID happened, there was already this scapegoating of people of Chinese descent buying milk powder and as if they're doing something criminal, and so there is a historical precedence to some of this. A person was at I'm just gonna read verbatim. I was waiting for a bus at Central Station. A man kept following me, screaming at me to go back to effing China, and then to F off your virus, and then continued to harass and follow me while screaming achoo, achoo. There was a verbal threat at a very prominent supermarket of a person who was waiting. He said that they were standing outside of Aldi, waiting to be picked up from an appointment they had at a nearby building, when suddenly this girl, who looked like she was at her late teens, early 20s, started muttering something angrily as she walked towards me. When she walked past me, she spat on the ground near me, glared at me. I looked up to her, utterly confused, and she looked at me in the eye and yelled out aggressively, "Yeah, I spat on you. What are you going to do about it?" Examples on jokes. A person was going to lunch to catch up with some old friends who are all non-Asian descent, and they randomly started making jokes about, Chinese eating bats, not thinking that I was actually of Vietnamese background, Australian, and would feel quite offended by it. I was and then another incident was a person was roller skating with their dog and their mom, and a older white lady of about maybe 35 to 40 years old, who was with her 3 children, started yelling at them, "Ching Chong," and harassing us. She told us we will probably eat our dogs, and told us to go back to China. We ignored her, but she approached us again when we took a break, got into my face and started to harass me and my mom again. She got embarrassed when I spoke up in English with my usual accent, which is an Aussie accent. She laughed off the experience. There were around 20-30 witnesses to the incidents, and no one actually came to help them. And there are quite a few more that we have listed in the report. From environmental context, someone was with their wife, and they were shopping at Bunnings. When I met a woman with a cute dog, I asked if I could say hello and pet the dog, and the woman said, "Of course," and was being very friendly. So I called my wife, who is of Indonesian background, who loves dogs much more than me. But then the woman screamed at my wife, saying, "Stay away from me. Can't you see I'm older and I'm in high risk category? Get away." I was totally shocked, as was the shop assistant standing next to me. My wife has been in tears and is too scared to go up to strangers now to say hello. She even said she wanted to go back home, quote, Indonesia. I really didn't know how to comfort her and realize what an impact this incident had on her. Some of the examples from workplace discrimination are some of this. I was sitting at the table near a lift area at work, eating lunch while waiting for someone. Two white female junior colleagues came off the lift and spotted me. They asked me why I was eating there instead of my own desk or somewhere inside the office area. One of them followed this question, "Oh, so you are self-isolating because that's what Asians do," in sort of a joking kind of way. I was taken aback by this explicit reference to Asians, and it felt it was inappropriate to reduce a colleague to a race. I didn't respond to this specific question and started to talk about other things. By now, more of my colleagues joined in the conversations. She then repeated the same question, "So are you self-isolating like all other Asians?" My other colleagues looked so uncomfortable, and she then said I was just joking. There are many digital online stuff and I probably cannot go through a lot of them, but these are the few that are listed there. Someone was commenting on a Facebook post on a news site about racism coming out of the baby milk formula reporting, and someone replied under my comment, stupid Chinese, deport them, no more Chinese welcome in Australia." And of course, this is quite common. Sadly, this is more often than many people actually imagine. And on another circumstance, a lady who was in a position of power in the Perth art scene expressed concerns about her children's school being only 50% of us whites. She then started to refer to her fears of catching the disease from Asian people online. Now, this is coming from someone that is pretty prominent in the Perth art scene. So I don't know how many more we want to read, but maybe I'll just park it here for now, huh? I think that's enough triggering examples for some of us, I think. Some of the physical ones, I think I might just leave it because it's actually a bit disturbing for me.
Thank you, Ben, for doing that. And just to reiterate what Ben said, if these experiences are quite triggering, I probably read through almost 541 of all the incidents. So, if it is triggering for people, feel free to mute at any time and seek help if you need to. So we're going to move on next, and I want to introduce, she probably doesn't need much introduction, but I'll still introduce her, Pallavi Sharda. So Pallavi is an actress, and she's, done some work in Australia, work in Bollywood, also in the UK and in Hollywood. So, you would have seen her in Lion, seen her in Beecham House, Tom and Jerry, and a whole host of different things. So I actually recently Googled Pallavi and I was like, wow, I've done so much work. And she's currently in, I believe, if she nodded her head, Toronto, Canada. Am I correct? No, Canada somewhere. So I just want to say thank you for kind of joining us, because I know it's quite late, where you are. So I'll just kind of let Pallavi talk from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. I'm in New York, actually. I wrapped my project in Toronto a few weeks ago. Gosh, just listening to what Ben said a few moments ago, it definitely brought about a lot of feelings in me, because these are incidents that I have witnessed firsthand. They are reminiscent of incidents that have occurred throughout my childhood in Australia. I don't think discrimination, race-based discrimination in Australia is a new thing. It's something that's been going on for many years. I'm an Australian-born woman of Indian heritage, and the us and them of growing up in Australia has been a reality for me my whole life, to the extent that in the screen industry, I made the move to India to work, because at a media representation level, it was very clear that inclusivity was not a reality at the time that I was starting my career. And I came back to Australia during the pandemic last year because I wanted to be close to my parents and I wanted to come home. And I experienced Melbourne's lockdown firsthand. And through that lockdown, I was doing the grocery runs. I was doing all the essential work that we needed to do in order to keep our home running. And I witnessed these small microaggressions occurring in the very multicultural suburb that I grew up in the northwestern suburbs of Melbourne. I will never forget going to Woolworths and meeting a person who was of Indian origin, turban-wearing Sikh man who was clearly a new migrant. And he saw me as an Indian woman, and I could see a sense of recognition that he felt between us, and he came to help me and asked if I needed anything. And I was astounded and horrified when one of his Caucasian looking managers or seniors swooped in and told him that he was out of line to face a customer in that moment and that he was needed elsewhere. And the tone that she used was very patronizing, and it was unnecessary. And it actually made me freeze. And I, to this day, am annoyed that I did not speak up in that moment to ask her why she spoke to this person that way. But the reality was it actually brought about so much inner trauma that I had experienced. And I went into a fight and flight response because I've been spoken to many times that way by people in positions of power. And I'm someone who has grown up and been educated in Australia and come into extreme privilege based on the fact that my parents migrated as skilled migrants in the 1980s. And I was educated in a private school and went to Melbourne University and all of the wonderful things that Australia can provide. However, that's not the demographic of all Asian Australians. And that's not the opportunity and the milieu in which all Asian Australians are living and existing today. And what I've witnessed is a lot of this us and them being augmented in the streets of Melbourne, in the ways in which we perceive people by their colour and by the way they look before their humanity. And I think that the pandemic has only heightened this, and it's allowed us in a way to have this conversation in a robust fashion, and that's a positive thing. But I do think these issues have always existed. And so I think now is the time that we can action against them and come together as a community to actually accept that this is a problem. I think denial has been a real factor in the way that the Australian social fabric is made up, that we're very inclusive, we're very multicultural. The policy of multiculturalism has allowed for a lot of these small transgressions or major transgressions to be overlooked for so many years. And the vibrational meanness, I would say, that occurs in small, subtle ways. For example, if I'm on an airplane and I'm traveling with a lot of Indian people into Australia, I see the way in which sometimes staff treat people that come in hordes, wearing different garbs, talking in a different language. And I feel acutely aware, because I understand the codes of both cultures, what that communication actually is, and the fact that it is a negative communication and not positive and welcoming. And what we witnessed in Australia in relation to the ban on flights from India, while I can't claim to understand the science behind why that decision was made, I would always defer to the decision makers who have the medical expertise to take those calls. I do feel that there was an inequity in the way that was handled in relation to in comparison to the way we handled the incoming flights from other countries, as Aka already said, and a few people have already said. And I think what that highlighted for me, because a lot of people stuck in India were Australian citizens, and the idea of the new migrant and the newly formed Australian citizen as being less than someone who's living and working in Australia and has been for multiple decades, whether they might be of migrant background or not be of migrant background. But I do think that there is a hierarchy of belonging that has been established in the rhetoric that we hear from our leaders in Australia, whether or not they intend it, whether or not they code their language, that is what's being felt. And I always say that if you feel it, it's real. So the fact that all of us have come together to speak about these issues is because we've collectively felt that there is something vibrationally that is not working, and that the way that we need to communicate and the way that we need to exude empathy, it requires work. And I just hope that we can all open our eyes and stick up for one another. It's an old Australian primary school idiom and saying, stick up for your mates. I think that the fear-based existence is hard in a pandemic. We're all crippled by fear of getting sick, of our loved ones getting sick. but I don't think that that fear should trump our basic humanity and the cohesion that we could have in our society and ought to have, given how lucky we are in a place like Australia to call it home. So if there's any way in which I can support this cause, I will continue to do so and speak on it. It's something I'm very passionate about, and it is very personal to me, as it is for many of the people here. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say for the moment.
Thank you, Pallavi, for your time. And I know it's very late for you in New York. I think it's about the same time as if you were in Canada as well, probably about
Right.
similar time. So thank you very much for your time as well. And you're right, even though everyone kind of assumes that this whole COVID racism is just about East Asian racism, we just have to remember that it's actually shifted and it's actually going everywhere. And at the moment, like we said, the racism towards particularly the South Asian or Indian Australian community was quite obvious from the Commonwealth government in terms of the travel ban. And leaving Australians of Indian majority, we know the majority of them in India are, Australians of Indian background. And that is something that, is really unheard of. So thank you.
And I just want to add, Erin, if I may, on that point, I think that, the Australian government has benefited from the economics of international education, something which has been a huge boost to the Australian economy for a number of decades right now. And that is primarily how a lot of new migrants come to be in Australia, first as students, then as permanent residents, and then finally as citizens. And there is a certain hoop jumping that they have gone through. A lot of them have worked very hard to earn that status as Australians. So they deserve exactly the same treatment as every other citizen. And race-based discrimination and cultural discrimination, which I know exists on the ground. When I'm in Australia, I make an effort to speak with anyone that I meet that I know is a new migrant to understand their experience. And there is a real sense of being treated as second rate because of their new migrant status. So that's something that we need to remedy.
Great. Thank you very much for that. We'll move on next to Nicola Britton. So Nicola is from GoFundMe Australia, and we collaborated with GoFundMe, and Nicola was the one who originally contacted me via LinkedIn, and it's been a very meaningful collaboration in terms of us doing the Stop Asian Hate Australia campaign and getting these wonderful people like Pallavi, Aka, Chris Pang, and Remy, and we hope to continue this campaign. And just before I move on to Nicola, just if anybody wants to interview Pallavi or Aka, just let us, or Chris or Remy, just let us know, and we will definitely, try to make the best arrangement possible. So Nicola, I'll kind of leave it to you to do the next part.
Yeah, absolutely. And completely agree. Thank you to Pallavi and Aka there for kind of sharing their experiences. A bit of context, yes, I did reach out to Erin after actually attending a vigil myself in Sydney, and kind of, I've been feeling the rise in racism since the start of COVID. And so I just went along to the vigil that Erin and the team organised in Sydney just to check it out, and did reach out. But meanwhile, my colleagues overseas were also working on similar campaigns, and we actually have ended up now launching a global Stop Asian Hate movement in partnership with organisations around the world. Initially bubbled up in, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware on this call, in the States after the rise in hate crimes against the AAPI community, which led to the devastating attacks in Atlanta. And then it's really, what followed was this rapidly moving grassroots campaign to, channel some of that hatred and shift the narrative into some positive action. Meanwhile, GoFundMe, here at GoFundMe, we're starting to see a rise in numbers of fundraisers to help individuals and families in response to the attacks overseas, and families here in Australia impacted by COVID. So we just wanted to help channel, that positive response we were seeing on our platform channel that into, amplify those voices of people who are being impacted. There's a lot of individual voices working in silos. We had spoken to multiple kind of people who were saying, everybody's sensing it, everybody's feeling it, and there's not one central place where any people can go to take action and get credible information. How do they report it? What do they do if they experience an incident and want to help a friend out, or they've experienced it personally? So yeah, we would really, we really wanted to help, use our global and local campaigns expertise and just help channel some more positive action. And I guess, often when we see a trend happening, bubbling up on GoFundMe, it's really just the tip of the iceberg, and it's usually quite indicative of a broader systemic issue. So what we try and do frequently is, step in and try and shift the narrative with experts like the Asian Australian Alliance, and actually help, connect the people on our platform with those on the front line of fixing the issues to help drive tangible change. Some of the causes and issues we see on GoFundMe, we just don't want to ever see happen again. So we do, have a concerted effort to try and fix them. So the Asian Australian Alliance, the work that they're doing to, being the central place that people can report, and having this, very crucial and vital system at the moment of tracking the incidents and the nature of the incidents and how they're constantly shifting at such an important time as a society. Was an absolutely meaningful partnership to us. So we pulled together the committee of advisors, including the people who have spoken on this call today, just to get a sense of what was needed next. And that's where Stop Asian Hate Australia was born. So yeah, we really saw it as a moment here in Australia to raise awareness of the fact that just because we're not seeing racist attacks play out as those in the States are very visual and frequent, it doesn't mean that it's not happening daily, and the nature is slightly different, but it doesn't mean it's not as damaging. And it is happening here in Australia too. So with the Stop Asian Hate Australia campaign, we just wanted to get our heads together. We pulled together a central platform. We've got a central hub that's full of resources and educational material. It's got a very, very obvious place to report directly into the Asian Australian Alliance's ongoing report that's going to be continuing, so that they can continue to track the nature of the incidents, and therefore work with decision makers and policy makers to try and end that. But there's lots of resources on that platform for anybody who might just not know where to go. I think one of the things that was really kind of prominent in the report is the fact that 90% of people don't report these incidents. So having that place where they can go to take action was very important to everybody on the committee to bring this campaign to life. So yeah, we're really looking forward to continuing this partnership to continue to amplify the voices of Asian and Asian Australians in Australia.
Thank you, Nicola. And, like I said earlier, it's been a very great and meaningful collaboration, and we look forward to a lot more discussions on our next steps from here. So we will have time for questions, and, we may extend extra five minutes or so, but I did want to get Molina back on just to spend just a very couple of minutes just to go through some of the recommendations. Obviously, there's a lot more sections in the report, including analysis and a comparison between two periods. So of reporting, in terms of no overlap with the old report. So if you get a chance, just check out that report, and there's a table there. So because we want to give some time to question time, so I'll just leave it back to Molina to just go through a couple of minutes, just a few of the key recommendations.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, I won't go through all of them because we're running out of time, but I'll just mention a few. Some of them are from the report before as well, because obviously we have the same recommendations, but things have moved forward since then. So we did, so one of our recommendations is that the Commonwealth government needs to clearly and unequivocally acknowledge the growing anti-Asian racism and make an official statement condemning it. A bipartisan motion should also be passed in Australian Parliament to show our nation's leaders take the growth in racism seriously. We've also recommended that individual state governments need to consider funding statewide centralized tracking systems for racism and hate crimes against Asians and Asian Australians, and provide funding for Asian Australian community organizations who are already tracking racism and hate crimes. A similar model to consider would be California lawmakers allocating 1.4 million towards helping Asian Americans report and tracking attacks to Stop AP Reporting Center. The bill passed in the California state legislation is called AB 85. The Commonwealth government needs to hasten the pace to implement the proposed new national anti-racism framework. Community consultations are currently being held on the proposed framework associated with Australian Human Rights Commission. And this is actually a development from since last year. So we were very excited that this is actually happening, and hopefully we want to see this implemented quicker. There's a new one that we've put in about peaceful community-based volunteers to be organized into community safety patrols and patrol areas where there is a high concentration of Asian Australian residents and businesses, to provide a type of neighborhood watch. These patrol groups should include Asian Australians, those who have fluency in other Asian language, and allies who want to lend their time and support. We had recommended earlier about a creation of simple multilingual reporting avenues to facilitate reporting of incidents for those for whom English is not a first language, and removal of legislative barriers to prosecution for racially motivated criminal actions, and strengthening of anti-vilification laws, noting problems in New South Wales with existing laws. So the Victorian government has actually acted on this and is seeking to strengthen anti-vilification legislation in Victoria based on the recommendations of the inquiry into anti-vilification protections tabled earlier this year in the Victorian Parliament, which we were involved with in making a submission as well. So these there are other recommendations as well for, in terms of reporting by journalists and social media platforms and all of that. But you can go through our report for to get get some information on that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Molina, for that. And before we go into questions, I just want to make just a few more quick acknowledgements that I want to make a special acknowledgement to one of our Victorian organisers for the Asian Australian Alliance, Peter Chuang, who did a very great job. A lot of sleepless nights with me, doing a lot of the editing work and also contributing and helping me with the calculations of the data as well. So I want to acknowledge him. And as well as some of our partners and supporters. So we've already heard from GoFundMe Australia through Nicola, but also the other few organizations which have partnered up when we launched the survey, Democracy in Colour and Diversity Arts Australia. And if those who haven't seen it, if you go to the I am not a virus Australia.org, and I know Kevin Barthman's on there. So if you can put the link, the website link in the chat, there is a great exhibition of titled, with the theme I am not a virus. And there's a lot of great artwork which has been inspired by this situation. A lot of great Asian Australian creatives have just displayed their work. So if Kevin, if you can hear, because I know you're there, if you can just put a link into the chat so that people can kind of click on it if they would like to. So I guess we'll have some time for questions. If you have questions, feel free to kind of raise your hand, and I'll kind of just coordinate the question time. So, okay, so we'll go for Marcus. Can you unmute yourself, or you need someone to unmute you? I can't remember. Oh, you can.
I think I've just done it. Good to go.
Yep. Go. Yep.
Look, hi. I think I just want to make some comments and some observations. Some of you may know me. I started a website called APAC News, which I edit, which initially it was going to focus on Chinese-Australia engagement in culture, et cetera, et cetera. And then COVID-19 came along, and basically in February last year, I decided that I just saw this rise in racism, and I wanted to push back against it. You know, I grew up in an Australia where I said to one of my Sri Lankan friends yesterday, what were the first words out of my mouth at the school assembly when I sang the national anthem? And he thought it was a trick question. And the first words out of my mouth were, "God save our gracious Queen." You know, when I was growing up, on any form that you had to fill out, you were asked for your surname and your Christian name. You know, my family came here under the White Australia policy. My father got a job in 1956 at a company called CIG, which is now BOC Gases. They had 3,000 employees. He was the first non-Anglo employee of that company and got the job purely by accident because they needed someone who spoke German desperately the day he went in, not for his interview, the day he went in to be told he's not going to get an interview because he was Dutch. So I've, you know, pursued this a lot. You know, this idea of the attacks on the Asian community. I've been misconstrued because I come from mainstream media. I worked in politics, and I'm being forever slandered as a mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. Some of you may know I'm involved in litigation as we speak. I am suing the Commonwealth government and a Commonwealth parliamentary researcher, a guy by the name of Jeffrey Wade, specifically for making those allegations that I'm acting on behalf of a foreign government, when all I care about is people. So here are my observations. Ben, you made a really, really good observation. Something which really hit me was one of the attacks was, what are you going to do about it? And that's crucial to this thing. The attacks on the Asian community at every level, and I'm very much looking at an institutional level, they occur because people know there's nothing going to be done about it. So there really needs to be unity. I mean, this report says 52% of respondents who've been attacked identify as Chinese in heritage. So it's a matter for the entire Asian community, for the North Asians, the Southeast Asians, and the South Asian communities. There's got to be unity. If that front is there, I think that's going to, you know, really push back. There is institutional racism. One figure in this report I don't believe is that only 2.2% of racial abuse, if you will, is coming out of workplaces. I think it's much, much higher than that, but people are just fearful of speaking out and losing their jobs. So that's something that needs to be tackled, and there needs to be consequences. I was in Canberra recently, and I met with a number of Chinese community leaders there, and I was absolutely shocked. One of the people I met with was a public servant who spent 40 years in the Australian public service, now retired, a man in his late 60s, who broke down and wept because he simply felt his community was just so open to abuse and had no mechanism and no will in which to push back. And one of the other people I met with was a senior business person who deals a lot with government, being in Canberra. And something she said really stuck with me. She said, I'll be in a meeting with senior bureaucrats and they'll let something slip. They're about to say something racist, but then they all of a sudden pause mid-sentence because they realize there are consequences. So, you know, there just needs to be consequences. There needs to be unity. And I think it needs to be grassroots. We're not getting it from above. As I said, you know, I'm suing the Commonwealth government, and I don't think I'm giving up any positions now because the matter's, you know, is listed for hearing in, what are we now, 2 weeks' time. The Commonwealth government's position basically is Marcus, we get it, but we are going to financially destroy you because you've spoken out against one of our employees who is a serial abuser and targeter of Asian Australians. So it's not going to come from the top. I think there needs to be grassroots engagement, and it needs to be across all Asian communities. So, as I said, I've got APAC News as my website. If anyone in this forum wants to contribute to editorials or talk to me or pitch me story ideas, just go onto the website or message me now. So That's basically what I've got to say. Thanks very much for time.
Thank
And
you.
also thanks for getting a photo of me on the front page of the cover at the rally in Circular Quay.
Thank you, Marcus. We did have a kind of a comment / question from our Facebook live feed. So from Sam Kwan. Countries like UAE and Singapore have banned racism and imposed jail time. China and Russia have autonomous ethnic zones. Perhaps Australia can establish ethnic political representation and fund languages and mosques to further service the diverse cultures of Australia, which would help international commerce and promote ethnic harmony. So does anybody else have any questions that would like to ask? Feel free to kind of raise your hand if you have any other questions.
Can I just respond to some of the,
Yes.
one of the comments made by Marcus, and also something that's come through here?
Yep.
It's about, I think the bar that is put on criminal prosecution is very high. It's about vilification, and it's not always easy to prove vilification. I'm a lawyer and I know that. How hard is it to prove, that burden of proof when it shifts to the person who's been abused it's too hard to prove. Where are you going to get the proof from? That it happens in places where there's maybe nobody else present, or if they were strangers. And with our report as well, we've seen a lot of these incidents happen on the street or on a sidewalk or in the supermarket. And where do you find the evidence? Maybe there's CCTV camera footage, but then finding that person, it's really hard to prosecute anyone based on that. And then we know that the Australian Human Rights Commission and the state-based bodies also have conciliatory kind of powers rather than sanctions that they can impose. So I think we really need to strengthen our system. And some of the governments have started that process, but we need a lot more to be done for this to really effectively work.
Thank you, Molina. If there's no more questions, obviously we're going to be, a lot of them, few other media outlets are looking forward to watching the recording. So if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us on our Facebook page, Asian Australian Alliance. We also have a Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram. So you can probably just find us by searching Asian Australian Alliance as a handle. Just want to first of all thank everybody for attending today. Like I said, we planned for this press event to be a little bit smaller because we didn't want to make it into, it was not an event, but we wanted, it is live streamed to our Facebook page. So a lot of people are checking it out, and we will have a recording, which we'll be sending out to other media outlets. So if you'd like to talk to any of our ambassadors / advisors, or, GoFundMe or any of us at the Asian Australian Alliance, just feel free to drop us a line on Facebook page or email us at info@asianaustralianalliance.net. So with that, we're going to be publishing the report onto our Asian Australian Alliance website, probably within the next hour or two, or sometime today. So hopefully I'll get to it ASAP. But again, thank you for attendance, everybody. And thank you to everybody who's watching via Facebook live stream. And thanks for all your comments. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for joining.